Hello. Welcome to today's session of Selling the Couch. I hope you're doing well, having a fantastic day. So one of the questions that I've been thinking a lot about as STC continues to grow is, well, a couple of different questions. One is, how big do I actually want to grow STC? What is the purpose of STC in relation to my overall life? As you've probably heard from previous episodes of the podcast or these videos, building my business around my life and my family and my health is like my most important thing. Freedom is like my most important value. And this question in entrepreneurship, which is when we start these companies, it seems like in many ways the default is to continue to grow. And so if you've hit a certain threshold, then you have to keep growing. There's even phrases like, if you're not growing, then you're shriveling or dying, meaning your business is, if it's not growing, then it's not, then it's dying. And I've really been sitting with that idea, and I don't know, for me, there's just a lot of things I've been thinking through. Recently, I had the chance to read The Company of One, which is Paul Jarvis's book, which I highly recommend if you are a solo business owner, or even if you're a group practice owner and you're really thinking about how big you want to grow your group practice, or if you're a therapist that's made this transition to online creator and you're hiring or thinking about hiring, and what does all of that even mean? I wanted to specifically share 5 of the things that I picked up from this book. But even before we jump in, I wanted to share just something openly and honestly. I never imagined myself becoming an entrepreneur. I've never taken a business or marketing class. I wasn't even something like business wasn't even something that was on the back of my mind. To be completely honest, when I became licensed as a psychologist, I imagined working at a university counseling center, eventually becoming a training director, and then probably doing private practice or teaching, some combo of those three together, and that would be my professional career. But then, as I started STC in 2015, and over these past couple of years, I've been slowly transitioning out of clinical work, and I, have really found my passion in helping therapists start podcasts and online courses. And my default, and I know you will resonate with this because I feel like for most of us as clinicians, we default to generosity, and by which I mean that we want to try to help as many people as possible. And that's the mindset that I took until I couldn't do that anymore. And part of that was just straight burnout, feeling like, having bouts of insomnia with our daughter Chloe being born in 2018. There was just, and being 2 months early, there was just so much stress on top of everything else that was happening. And it really made me question a lot of stuff, specifically related to not STC, because I love STC, but more of these questions around what is enough, and is it okay? Am I a successful entrepreneur if I actually cap or limit the growth of my business? Because the reality is the world of entrepreneurship teaches us a lesson over and over again, which is more is better. And I fell into this. I wanted a business. I remember just even when STC was a small idea, I remember thinking this would be amazing if in the span of a lifetime, I could make $100,000 a year off of STC. I would just be amazing. And when we hit it a few years ago, we hit 151,000. I remember feeling like, man, I want, this is cool that I got here. And I was like, maybe I want to aim to 250K or 500K or even $1 million a year. In this weird way, it felt like this drug that I wanted to chase that I couldn't get enough of. And especially for someone that has grown up with achievement and feeling like my own self-worth is pitted and is a result of what I accomplish and not who I am as a person. It's been this lifelong struggle. My burnout looked different, and I guess it manifested in a kind of an interesting way. One is I started, as STC was growing and as I was also managing clinical work, which, for me, one of the things I've realized is I'm not really, at least in this season of life, I'm not really wired to 2 different businesses, because I wanted to keep things very clean, legally and ethically. So they were, I had 2 different LLCs and all of these things. But what happened was I was going through just bouts of insomnia, and this was even before Chloe was born. And what was often happening was there was just things that I had to do for both businesses, and I couldn't turn my mind off. For example, like this happens so many times. I would wake up at like 2 in the morning to go to the bathroom or whatever, and then come back into bed, and then I would think about something that needed to be done the next day, and my mind would just go boom and just start thinking of ideas and getting worried about how I'm going to fit it in and do all of these things. And it just kept happening over and over. For me, what I realized is when my sleep is off, it usually triggers both anxiety and depression. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, I went through several sort of dark seasons of life. And what I ultimately found is that I was compromising to fit life around my business versus optimizing the business to fit the life that I wanted. And Paul Jarvis's book made me really think a little bit differently, that staying small was not a weakness, that it was actually an intentional step and a bold act of courage. And one of the first things that I picked up from the book was companies of one reject limitless growth. So as I mentioned, I started off achieving these income goals, 50,000 in revenue, then 75,000 in revenue, then 150,000. But then I would aim higher and higher. And do you know what most of us don't talk about when businesses grow? We put our highlights on social media. I think even me, I default to this as well. And I'm trying my best to like show the more holistic picture, right? The things that we don't talk about is the constant stress, the compromises that we make to our health and our relationships because we are overworking, the piercing stress headaches that seem to just never go away, the terrible eating patterns because we're just trying to stick something and get full so that we can continue to do work. The alternative that Paul Jarvis talks about is set firm growth limits to keep the opportunity costs small intentionally. So basically that you grow at a smaller rate so that you're intentionally saying, yes, I have this opportunity to grow my business, or I have an opportunity for this partnership or this new product, but I'm actually not going to do that because I have put this growth limit on my business. I have a dear friend that owns a web design agency, and one of the things that they have done as they have gone from a 6-figure to a multi-6-figure to a 7-figure sort of agency is they set what they call a 15% goal. So basically they said, we will not grow more than 15% every year in revenue. And on the surface, that seems like, how would you do that? Especially if there's opportunities and all of these things. But they reminded me of something so wise, which is, Mel, part of the equation is the revenue, but the other part of the equation that most people don't talk about is that it takes time for systems and hiring and all of these things when companies grow that big. And so if you set a 15% goal, one is lets you build a lot more slowly and a lot more intentionally. And then the other bigger thing is it helps you sit there and take a moment and a pause and say, hey, how do I like my business at this level? Like, is this something that it feels sustainable and enriching and meaningful? Or is this something like, hey, this growth feels a little bit too much. Let me kind of pull back because, I don't know that I like the compromises that I'm making along the way. In the book, The Company of One, the author mentions Sean D'Souza, who runs this company of one called Psychotactics, which basically provides consulting. One of the things that Sean talks about is they set a growth limit of $500,000 in profit per year. Now, 500,000 is just a number, right? So you have to figure out what that number is for you. It could be as simple as, I want to have 40,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 in profits, whatever it is, right? And I distinguish between revenue and profits. So revenue is obviously the total money that the business is making. Profits is actually the income minus expenses, right? So, and Paul Jarvis basically says that even though, Psychotactics could make more money if they wanted to, Sean D'Souza purposefully chose to restrict his company to this profit goal. And you might be wondering why again is that? And, the notorious B.I.G. basically had it right, which says more money, more problems. So that practically means more hiring decisions you got to think through, more people that you're responsible for, their families that you're responsible for, their well-being you're responsible for, more pressure to make if you're an online creator or you're doing the online business thing like I am. There's more pressure to make every launch work, and you are, for at least for me, like there's I'm so hard on myself when things don't go as quite as planned. And just being completely honest, as for someone like me who's an immigrant to the US and a person of color, when just to even fit in many ways ways in various parts of living here in the US. I've had to be exceptional, and when you're exceptional all the time, it is exhausting. When you have to be exceptional just to even get recognized, it's absolutely exhausting. What I realized is in taking these sort of small steps, I figured out that freedom is my biggest value. And so what does that look like? I want to be able to sleep 8.5 hours a night, sound sleep, restful sleep. I want to be able to do daily hikes. We've got a park that's near our house. There's a nice 2.5 to 3 mile loop that I get to do daily. I want to be able to do that. I don't want to be so busy working or busy launching and all these things that I can't do that. I want to be present with my loved ones. We're in a season now with both a young child and with aging parents. I feel like time is so precious these days, and how do I intentionally build time with loved ones, family members, with friends into my life? Because ultimately at the end of life, I feel like the things that we most cherish are those relationships that we had, right? And the things that we most regret are wishing that we could spend more time with the people that we love and care for. I also want to optimize for being a present dad. I mean, this is a question I actively think about, right? If I am so busy growing STC and I'm busy making all this money, but I'm not a present dad, and it's not physically present, it's also like emotionally present. If my mind is focused on, something that needs to be done for STC while, Chloe is asking to spend, to color with data, right? Is that being fully present dad? I also want to optimize just for eating clean, and, I've really tried to optimize for my nutrition and just to stay on top of my health these past couple of years, and those are things that are important to me. And this is the hardest part because I have not arrived here at all with this. The reality is, in this sort of model, I may never achieve actually a $1 million business, especially in profit. I feel like, but what I've realized is I am living a $1 million lifestyle in my early 40s, a lifestyle that I hoped that I could live in retirement. And I think for me, what I'm realizing is, again, very slowly, but there's nothing in the world that's more valuable than that. Number 2 is companies of one are okay with limited success. So, when a small business stays small, it's usually, most people say, oh yeah, it's considered a limited success, right? Some small businesses are okay with that, but many would like to expand in order to grow their profits, to be more successful and on a financial metric in the eyes of others. Basically chase that definition of bigger is better when it comes to success. But the thing again to consider is more profits mean more production, more sales you got to account for, more customers you got to handle. And if you're a therapist, you have more clients, more infrastructure, more clinicians that may be working under you. So, you're all of those kind of challenges that brings, whether it's managerial challenges, all of that stuff, right? That means more employees, more infrastructure, more bureaucracy. So I've got 3 friends right now that, have built very successful businesses, and they're all in this season of burnout, and where they're all just so exhausted, and they are noticing that they're just not as present, and they're spending a disproportionate time on their work when in fact, when they had started this whole thing, their thing was, I actually want to build a business to support the lifestyle. And as their businesses have grown, it's flipped over, and now they're fitting life again to fit around what the business needs. Companies of one, in contrast, would decline growth if they've already reached their growth limit. For them, staying small isn't a mark of failure. It's the very definition of success, achieving and sustaining a self-defined level of income. So that's something that I'm really thinking about. I mentioned in a few episodes ago all about, capping sort of the growth of my business and why I'm thinking about it, and even getting into that, I would love to, what I thought was $1 million a year would be something that we would need. I'm realizing we don't even need anywhere near that amount in terms of being able to live a very comfortable and a free lifestyle. And this is something I've been just thinking a lot about. What is my self-defined level of income, to basically sustain the life that we want. Number 3 is that Paul Jarvis recommends is develop your business out of a side gig. Now, we've all seen stories, of these brave entrepreneurs who walk into their boss's office and they just sort of resign, right? I really respect people who can do that. I am not wired at all that way. I get way too anxious and too overwhelmed. And the reality is, those stories get clicks on social, it gets views, all of those things. But Jarvis points to this other alternative, which is basically don't quit your day job. Like many companies of one, a new business will likely come out of a side gig. It basically needs time to incubate and grow so that you can turn it into a full-fledged company that you can devote to it full time. I'm a big advocate of this. Personally, for me, I got licensed in 2012. I did clinical work from 2012 to 2020. STC was a side gig. It was an idea that I came up with in the winter of 2014, and I literally pulled back hour by hour on clinical work, and only if it was sustainable. And it was a long journey. I'm not even gonna lie. I mean, that's many years of just wanting to jump into something, but then also being really thoughtful about it again, because you had a family support, all of these things. It was so hard to wait so long, but it was also freeing because I knew when the time had arrived, there was much less monetary pressure because we had built a little bit of a nest egg. I, even had thought, there's some options that I could go back clinical work if I needed to, if something didn't work out. Unfortunately, thus far, that hasn't been the case. Now, that being said, maybe not in this season of life, one of the things I do realize is I do miss, therapy, and I do miss clinical work. So I'm thinking about how do I sort of integrate it, and is this a season for that integration? Don't know yet, to be determined. I'll keep you updated on that. But number 4 is what Jarvis recommends is target a specific audience to find your niche. So, we've often heard this as therapists, which is, as you are doing private practice, or if you are making this transition from therapist to online creator, whether you're doing a podcast or online course or speaking or whatever, you should always niche, right? And there's a lot of truth to this, Jarvis says. In trying to appeal to everyone, you end up appealing to no one. He actually cites this story of Starbucks, and Starbucks in the mid-2000s is booming. Stores were everywhere, and it feels like even just in every corner. But with more products, the experience of Starbucks became pretty bland. So they were basically going from just coffee to, going to sandwiches and CDs. I hope you're listening and know what a CD is. If you don't, just completely ignore this or do a Google search. But they had all these fancy drinks and all of this stuff. Basically, Starbucks lost its former charm, and it was overstretched and beyond what it was the best at. And the company began to flounder. And by the end of the decade, it had closed about 900 stores. And in response to that, Starbucks scaled back and then refocused on its mission. They learned the hard way that you can't be everything to everyone. And the other point that Jarvis makes is that when you try to appeal to everyone, you are going into these larger markets that attracts hordes of competitors that have way bigger staffs than you, that have way bigger, budgets and all of these things. It just makes it really hard to stand out. So what he recommends is look for your niche, and the smaller, the more specific your target audience is, the easier it is to connect and build trust and distinguish their needs. One thing that's been helpful for me with STC, and also when in our online course mastermind, when I'm working with therapists that are creating online courses, one of the things I always recommend is niche to a population. So, mine has now shifted to therapists moving from clinical to online income. And so it's not even all therapists, it's not even all therapists in private practice, right? Even though these STC podcast episodes have both, private practice and sort of online income, the products that I offer are actually, I have a podcasting course for therapists. I have an online course mastermind for therapists to help kind of plan and build out and scale your offers. The benefit of this, of niching to a population, is it just makes it so much easier to create content and future offers. Also, if you become an authority with a specific population, you can usually find the slice of that population that has spending power. And so you can then charge premium prices for your product and services. And the final kind of point that Jarvis makes is embrace the power of simplicity and personality. So basically amplify the uniqueness by sharing more of yourself. As a small-time creator, your most powerful asset is yourself and your personality, right? So by doing that, you can actually stand out even if you are a small fish compared to your competitors. And I learned about this in the Maven. I went through this accelerator program called Maven, which is basically the best practices of how to do like live teaching in a cohort-based course model. So I implement a lot of the teaching in our mastermind. And one of the things that I learned about in Maven is what's called turning a bug into a feature. So you may, for example, see yourself as a small creator. You might be like, I can't do, all of some of the things that I want to do, right? But how could you turn that into a feature? What are the advantages of being a smaller business? One thing I realize is we can be so much more nimble. We can, plan collaborations, we can plan product services, we can post things on social at such a more rapid pace because we don't have to go through like 10 different chains of commands. It's literally just me and, my virtual assistant / like head of operations. And we've got some independent contractors that help us with podcast editing, video editing, and stuff like that. But at the core of it's just the two of us. And so we're just able to do things at a faster pace. Now, the key thing is you really want to keep things simple, and you also want to infuse your personality into it. So, some of the things that, I don't know that I even intentionally meant to do this, but, some of the things that I really have realized is I'm kind of a nerdy guy. I'm, try to be really intentional. I try to just be a nice, kind, and human being, doing things ethically, especially as a psychologist. That's like really important to me, not because just for my business, but because I realize like I'm a model for others and I want to do things with intention and with care. And so if you one little thing that's just been helpful is write a list of those kind of things, what you want to be known for. That way, as you create content and products and services, you can infuse that into those products, and then you're indirectly or directly infusing your personality to it. So again, to wrap up, the 5 things are: companies of one reject limitless growth. Number 2 is companies of one are okay with limited success. Number 3 is to develop your company out of a side gig. Number 4 is target a specific audience and find your niche. And number 5 is embrace the power of simplicity and personality. I hope that you enjoyed today's session, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.